a strong room, etc. These are successes primarily because, I mean, they're less successful, and a lot of these actually are from the non-English speaking area. So the English media never picks it up, and so you and me don't read about it. But that's a brilliant success, and it's a case model in Yale and MIT, but none of the Indian management school actually take it as a case study. I think that's where I'm talking about the sensitivity of us getting connected to the rural areas. Education, there are successes. You go to rural UP, Bihar, there are successes where people are using diesel generator to optimize education. It's just a matter of time where you can actually put solar, and it actually makes economic. See, what happens in our society is, as you go deeper into the economic strata, solar actually becomes economically viable. In this country, solar is expensive for the rich and affordable for the poor. Yep. True, because the amount of money people on a daily basis, like a street vendor spends 15 rupees on a daily basis on kerosene, 450 rupees. Solar at her doorstep at 14% interest comes to 6 rupees. It's a cash flow we need to look at, not the modular cost. And we need to talk about cost of energy packets that are done on a daily basis. Yeah. And that will actually change the equation. So there are a lot of successes that are happening in our country, in the rural areas, in terms of sustainable energy. I think it's the urban folks that have to learn rather than teach. Exactly. I think we need to actually rework our thought process. Replicate, because it's easy. If the 9 banks are able to finance it, take it to NABARD. NABARD says, okay, there are 40,000 banks in our country. How did we have the agricultural financing when the Green Revolution took over? That 40% of your financing for the rural farmers are to be done through priority sector, and parallelly you had 650 ITIs in the 650 districts which had pump repair shops, agricultural training programs, subsidy for, fertilizer training. You need to use the same channel. Which other developing country has 40,000 banks in the rural areas? Everybody knows that the rich in India, whether it's Europe or US, forget what happened in the last 2 years, succeeded because the availability of credit at the doorstep. And that 40,000 banks actually can provide that. And that is what, it's easily replicable. Go to NABARD, we can actually have a policy that 5% of your end user financing has to be for renewable energy. You'll see the change. Comment is, everybody in Delhi thinks that, oh, solar is expensive. No practitioners are allowed in the policy side. I think we need to.
Ashok, even with you and your simulation model,
6 months
this
back,
thing like that?
No long. I think that's fast changing. It's very rapid change.
Yourself, please, sir.
So I want to take from the earlier question about whether it really makes sense to focus on optimizing energy and network and so on.
1 or 2% is growing rapidly. And if we don't do anything, it'll become 6% or 10%, or if you project out 20 years, maybe 50%. And so we can't just ignore that. The fact is that it's growing rapidly. But surely it must be a combination of both approaches. Sure, we need to figure out ways to use renewable energies, whether it's in rural parts of India or in the big cities in Western countries. We need more renewable energy, and at the same time we need to reduce the amount of energy consumption so that renewable energy can be used effectively. The less energy consumed by all sectors, whether it's the telecommunications sector or other sectors, the less energy consumed means that as renewable energy comes online, it can be used across a wider spectrum of the community. So I think the answer clearly is that there's a combination of both. We need to.
Because that if you optimize for energy of the network, you might be making choices that hurt in other ways, like network reliability or some other aspects of the network.
Well, I think that in fact, since this particular workshop is focused on GreenTouch and research around those activities. GreenTouch is in fact taking into account those factors. Now, clearly it's very different whether it's in a rural area in India or in New York City, the difference between making the cell size smaller, and there'd have to be an allowance made for those different situations. But clearly what you need to do is in each case optimize the network for energy consumption in a way that's targeted at the particular environment that it's focused on. So sure, you'd have to do it differently in a rural area from in a city area.
I also want to look at the question from the 2%, 98% because, as Rod said, it's growing rapidly, and all of that is true. But when you take a look at it from a carbon emissions perspective, as you point out, you have to take into account the total life of the equipment, how to produce it, manufacture it, deploy it, etc. In telecommunications, in general, it's the operational life that emits most of the energy. But in solar, actually producing solar from a carbon emission, depending on the life, and of course, we talk about it here in India, it's very sunny, so you can utilize it, but it's also very dusty. If all of a sudden dust gets on these things, and you can actually flip it negative, where it takes more energy from a carbon emissions perspective to make it than you actually get back out. So we normally think about solar and alternative energies from a cost perspective, CapEx versus OpEx over the years, rather than an emissions perspective. And you have to be very careful about that as you go through the analysis. It's very dependent on that.
Go ahead, please. I had a question for you. In terms of social entrepreneur, I think of Ben Viran, the CEO of Alcatel-Lucent, as an example of a tremendous social entrepreneur. When he helped form GreenTouch, he went against popular opinion, suggesting that we go for a humongous goal like this, work with our competitors, share our best people with our competitors. What do you think was going on in his head? It takes immense leadership to take what I know was an unpopular decision amongst lots of people, right? But he did it because he felt it was good for the society, for the planet, and also good for the company, right?
So I'm not going to claim that I have any special insight to the inside of Ben's head.
He's a Dutchman.
I mean, the leaders of universities, of corporations, of governments and whatnot tend to be very unique, multi-dimensional individuals that are extremely talented. One of the things, though, that I will point out over many discussions with Ben on this topic, and I think it's a valid piece for this discussion as well, is the general frustration in the pace. So, we talk about things, and sometimes we talk about things being 10 years out, and we think about that as fast, as you're going to transform rural India in 10 years. That's a tremendous effort. In some cases, it's very slow. When you take a look at Moore's law and circuit development and whatnot, 10 years or applications or whatnot is infinity. So there is this push, a very hard and significant push to break through the regulation perspectives, have governments profits through the World Economic Forum and other venues for everyone to be pushing to the extent that they can, because it needs these kind of problems at such a tremendous scale require help from many different perspectives.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
yeah.
Please, go ahead.
So this would probably be for Ms. Devi. Today, during the course of the workshop, we saw different opinions about renewables for telecom. So, in your opening talk, you mentioned that today, as base stations are, it's very expensive, and I mean, the solar panels required to power the base stations would be very huge. And then later, Dr. Ashok Jhunjhunwala mentioned how it's at a turning point, and actually solar energy per unit would be cheaper than all other sources combined. So, Ms. Devi, in your field experience and with the green sites and all of that, what have you seen as the challenges for adopting renewables for telecom, and whether that's a good approach or it's some time away? What's the state?
Solar definitely we have to go in for. Okay. Right now, many people have tested. The technology was evolving at that time. The cost was high, and the telecom sector did not have much of subsidiaries, and all these things added to some complexity as far as business was concerned. To put the solar as the marching ahead solution for anything. The second aspect of solar is we have to be very careful, it is not the solution, or I will say it as it is not the global solution. You have to look at the site condition. You have to look whether it is optimally used, okay? And you also have to see what is the autonomy required, how many days autonomy you are looking for it. All these complex calculations come around that. But definitely it is a solution what we have to look around, because India is not strong on the wind power. So because our wind speeds and other things are, to the requirement, it's slightly lower than what we have in most of the places. Sun is abundantly available. That is the only renewable. That is the reason everybody is looking at it, but cautiously. Okay, because it has got its own complexities, whether we should go off-grid, on-grid. On-grid is not allowed by the government. So there are a lot of policies also coming around that. So that is the reason little cautiously people are entering into it. We have also done a lot of solar off-grid sites, and it's like a viability, capex versus opex, how exactly it works, what is my return on investment. All these things need little more thoughtful thinking.
Okay. Dan, I have a question for you. So you are training the next generation of Indians, leaders, to be incredibly aware about energy issues, right? With the right behaviors, and they know how to not waste and so on, etc. Do you think you might see from them extreme innovation of the sort where they usher in the brave new world of energy, where there is huge reliance on networks or things like that? For instance, they've displaced carbon. They are showing the rest of the world how to live differently. Not this 20-30% business, but to live differently using the network. You think that will come from India? Do you see some signs of that? You have so many people here, right?
No, absolutely. And I say that, of course, I'm an optimistic, but more importantly, I think today's generation of people have a sense of empathy that perhaps is not visible in our generation. And I think